What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Raw Recovery, the community. If you see me looking back and forth, that's because I'm recording in the studio and I'm also recording live. So bear with me because it's a little bit hard to do a little bit of multitasking. But today's episode, we're going to be talking about recovery from homelessness. There's a lot of people that have been enduring, that has endured homelessness. They're currently homeless. And oftentimes, whenever we speak about recovery, people are only thinking about recovery from addiction. But again, homelessness is a part of people's traumatic experiences, and that is something that people have to recover from. As a person who came to New York homeless and in my addiction, I can speak from experience. No one wants to be homeless. That's just not something that a person wakes up and says, damn, man, I can't wait to be having my life fucked up and be homeless on the street. That's just not a thing. However, it is something that people experience. And unfortunately, people who are experiencing homelessness, they just get judged without a lot of times without any empathy, not thinking about what a person has been through or why they might be experiencing this homelessness. Of course, there's a lot of people who are suffering from addiction that it's led them to their state of homelessness. But a lot of the times, just you have to keep in mind that people are experiencing a form of some mental health that hasn't been addressed. As I explained previously, I'm recording live so that whoever watches the episode that we're recording, if we air this too late, you might miss the information. And for anyone who's paying attention right now, if you live in the New York area, Section 8 is open. So if you need any assistance with your rent or getting an apartment, you can now apply for Section 8. And it's open. It opened up on the 13th and it's open all the way until the 24th. So if that is something that you want to look into, then I would suggest going and applying for Section 8. I think that it is very important, not just with homelessness, not just with addiction, but with whatever you're in recovery from. It is so important to never get so healed and never get so far in your recovery that you forget where you came from. Why is that important? If you have any form of recovery, if you've been able to bounce back from any traumatic experience in your life and you've been able to rebuild, it is your obligation to help the next person. We do not get to get sober and have all of this healing and recovery and keep it to ourselves. The goal of recovering and getting your sobriety and getting housing is to be able to teach the next person, what is it that you did that helped you get your life back? There's always someone who's either been through what you've been through, currently going through what you're going through. And the only reason that a lot of us continue to stay sick or continue to stay in a place of homelessness or addiction is because we don't talk about it. Silence keeps us sick. For so many years, when I was dealing with my addiction and when I was homeless, I just felt like there was nobody I could talk to. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I would have got sober any faster, but I just know that if I had just that one person that I could relate to, that I could feel could hear me with a non-judgmental ear, I just know that things could have went differently for us. And I want to be clear for the people who have their nose so stuck up in the air when it comes to people who are homeless. Let's be very clear about something. If your name is not on the lease, or if your name isn't on the mortgage or whatever, technically you're homeless. Let's be very clear about that. Because at any time, a person can tell you to get the fuck out. At any time, a person could say, this isn't working out. You can't stay here, right? And I'm speaking from experience. In the state of New York, that's the law. If your name isn't on the lease, you're technically homeless. And when I was going through what I was going through and I was staying with someone, they could tell me to get out, and they have told me to get out. It's the most uncomfortable feeling in the world to be living with someone and to know that at any time you could be told to leave. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of places like New York, right? Like coming from Pittsburgh, when I was homeless in Pittsburgh, I was and if you're doing this, you're considered homeless. I'm gonna be clear. If you're couch surfing, if you're bouncing from place to place trying to find somewhere just to sleep for that night, then you are homeless. And that was my story for a long time, trying to find somewhere to live. But the great thing about New York, unlike other places, they have shelters. They'll give you a place to stay. They'll give you bedding, food, and not only are they helping you while you're in the shelter to find housing, they're helping you in other ways because, of course, everybody wants to get their own place. But if your mental isn't right, if you're still struggling with addiction, if you're unable to manage the certain things in your life, if you get an apartment, then unfortunately, if you get housing, unfortunately, you're going to lose it because you're not stable in those other areas. As you can see, as I was explaining to the people who are watching us live, I have a shirt that says, "Please stop feeding the gentrifiers." There's a lot of neighborhoods that are under new development. And of course, we want to see, things changing in the communities, but not so much that it's displacing people. As a housing specialist, it's so unfortunate that I can have a person on my caseload who has a job. They're working normal hours, making normal, decent money, and they still can't afford an apartment in the state of New York. And why is that? As I was explaining earlier, of course, there's things like Section 8, which I think is good for a person who's trying to get their feet back on the ground. And out here in New York, we have things called City FEPS vouchers that assist people with housing. While that does help certain people get into housing, unfortunately, it can be a hindrance to the person who makes average money at their place of employment. If you have an apartment that would typically be going for, let's say, $11.90, and then you have a person with a voucher that's for about $26.96, who do you think that the landlord's going to take? They're going to take that person with the voucher of $26.96 because, one, they know that's constant money, and two, they know they're getting more than the apartment is worth. So there's an array of reasons why people are suffering with obtaining housing. As I was saying previously, it's definitely fortunate for certain states to have shelter. And you might be wondering why some people don't just go to shelter. But let's be real. A lot of the shelters aren't safe. And unless you're in a family shelter, you're in a dormitory style shelter, which means you're just living in a common area with a lot of strangers that you just don't know. And that can be scary for a lot of people, especially a lot of people who have just come home from being incarcerated in prison. They've spent a long stretch being incarcerated. The last thing they really want to do is return to a shelter that's basically designed the same way. But what I will say is being in shelter can be very beneficial if you go in there with the mindset that you're not there to have fun, you're not there to make friends, you're really there just to get housing. Of course, nothing is easy, but working with the staff that is in the shelters, they can assist you with getting employment, getting your vital documents, and even getting connected to some resources. Like I was saying, of course, the goal is to get you housed, but if you get your housing and you're not mentally stable, and not just mentally, physically as well, medically as well. If you get an apartment and you're not well, how are you going to be able to maintain your expenses for the apartment or for your new house? Let's take it back to a person who might have had everything. How does a person seem to have lost and even end up homeless? There are so many scenarios for a person to lose everything that they've worked for. I have a person that I know who he and his wife, they had a beautiful home, but they had that home together. And unfortunately, he lost his wife. And as a result, he couldn't maintain that house. Do you think that he really wanted to lose his house? Do you think that that was what he had planned in his future? You never know what a person is going through. For example, I had many apartments, I had many cars, but when my addiction hit, I couldn't keep a job. Eventually I was coming to work drunk, and what happens? Your job is going to pick up on that, and they're going to fire you. Without a steady source of income, I can't afford my apartment anymore. And it starts as gradually as that. You lose your apartment, and then you're couch surfing until you finally realize you're homeless, right? And that in itself can be depressing and send you on another spiral or binge to continue drinking. That's why I'm saying it's important. Of course, we want to get housing, but the things that we do to maintain the housing, the steps that we take to maintain our housing, making sure that we're healthy physically and mentally. And why do I keep on stressing the mental? Because if you are at a point where you can't even get out of bed because your depression is taking over, then you're going to start getting in trouble with work as well. They're going to start docking you. They're going to start writing you up, realizing that you're not coming to work, things of that nature. Everything falls in line. Everything plays a role into maintaining safe and affordable housing. So if you've never experienced homelessness, which is not something I would wish on anyone, if you could just, for a minute, just imagine what it would be like if tomorrow you lost your job, you didn't have any savings, you didn't have any family willing to help you, rent is due, and if you have kids, your kids are still depending on you. What do you think is happening right now? You're going through a state of panic. The only difference between you and someone sleeping in shelter might be support system. They don't have those things. If you're someone who was to lose everything, do you have someone that you could turn to that can help you? Or have you burned all your bridges where people who just don't want to deal with you anymore? There's an array of things that people go through even before they're homeless. It's just like anything else. It's a buildup. People don't just become homeless overnight. So the goal of everything that we talk about is for people to just have some empathy. For me, living in New York, I really have to work on staying empathetic, especially when it comes to our homeless population, because it's easy to walk over someone. It's easy to make an assumption. It's easy to just think. And as a human, if a person should walk past you and their scent or their odor offends you, that's human. But I never want to get to the point where I'm looking down on a person because I was homeless, and unfortunately being homeless in Pittsburgh, however, I did hear things have been changing over the years, but from when I was there and when I was facing homelessness and when I was homeless, it's called a park bench. We don't got no shelters and things like that that's about to pay your rent. That's just not a thing. And for most people who do get to go to shelter, you have to be experiencing domestic violence. You have to have children. The average person such as myself, you better figure it the fuck out, right? Only in New York can you come and they got to give you 3 hots and a cot, and it don't mean you're incarcerated. Only in New York will they help you find an apartment and pay your rent for 5 years. It's so many different programs that they have here. And I don't want to say only in New York. I'm sure there's other states that have it, but my knowledge is New York, and I'm coming by way of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, the people who are out there are still suffering. So we have to do better as a society, as opposed to just sticking our nose up and talking down on the people who are suffering. How can we be a help to the next man? As I said on the last episode and the episode before and every other episode, people need people. How can you navigate this earth by yourself if you've never experienced certain things? And when did we start believing that homelessness is a personal failure as opposed to it being a community issue, something that we are all responsible for? If you see someone can fall off the wagon and become homeless and lose everything, what makes you think that can't happen to you? Of course, I'm not wishing that on you, but I'm just saying life really be lifing, and you never know what to expect. And nowhere in my mind did I ever think that I was going to be homeless. I damn sure didn't expect to ever move to New York. I don't really know a lot of people who just be like, I'm moving to New York. Unless you're rich and famous and, you got to go out here. But purposely moving to New York, the most expensive city in the world, no one really does that. But here I am, right? And I had to figure it out. And that just takes me back to when I first moved out here. I moved out here with my ex-boyfriend, and we moved into his family's house, and they weren't feeling me. And that just reminded me every day that you are homeless. Even though I had a place to go home to, at any time, my living situation could have been jeopardized. Pause. I just think it's so important that a person who is suffering from homelessness should still still be able to feel their dignity and still feel human. That's why when I was working in the shelters, even of course nobody's perfect. Nobody has good days every day. Sometimes I used to get into it with my clients, but at the end of the day, I never made them feel less than. Because we're all just one bad decision from becoming homeless, from losing everything. And I'll say working in the shelters and working with people in recovery from addiction, any type of help that I'm providing a person who was experiencing something that I experienced from the past, it's necessary. It's in a sense therapeutic for me because it just reminds me of where I could go back. And working with other people, it allows them to see where they can eventually be. And it's just a constant reminder of where I don't want to go back to. I do want to take this time to shout out some of our elected officials, especially here in New York. Even though I didn't plan to come to New York, I ended up coming to the best city in the world. We are well ahead of a lot of other states, a lot of other cities. Our elected officials seem to be getting with the program, specifically our new mayor, Mayor Mandani. I always butcher his name, but I will say the work that he is doing in the communities, it needs to be shouted out. I'm a part of an organization called Flatbush Tenant Coalition, and I'm also a housing specialist. So housing is my life. Me helping a person obtain safe and affordable housing, no longer being homeless. These are all things that I'm passionate about. And it's important that we have elected officials that are in line with what is needed in the community. Hence my shirt. Yes, we want to improve neighborhoods, but we don't want to improve neighborhoods and push people out of their very of the place that they may have even just grown up. For example, I live in an area in New York. I won't say exactly where because I got to keep some anonymity to myself. But I live in an area that has a lot of work getting done to it, and they just built a new YMCA. It's beautiful. But don't you know, half of the people in the community don't even know about it. Half of the people in the community can't even afford to go there. And that's pissing me off. You're gentrifying neighborhoods and you're pushing people out. You're raising the rent astronomically to a rate that people can't afford. An average apartment shouldn't be going for $26.96 in an area where I'm coming from. And what's concerning is the type of people that you're going to be bringing in. Whenever you hear about people worried about riffraff coming into their neighborhoods, I'm worried about the people that this gentrification is going to bring. The people who are now so afraid whenever they see a person on the streets that have been sitting on that corner smoking weed, been sitting on the corner playing checkers, or whatever it is that they're doing. But since that's not something you're used to in your neighborhood, and when you come into our neighborhood and you see the difference of how we maneuver, you might get a little scary. And when that happens, you might start calling the police to our neighborhoods when that's not necessary. So there's a whole trickle-down effect to what happens with gentrification. Mainly it's displacing people who have been living in the community for years and decades. A lot of people are fortunate to have some support system, people that they can lean on. But a lot of people aren't that fortunate. If, God forbid, just a scenario, you just had to up and leave your place for whatever reason, and you just couldn't go back to the place that you called home. What if you didn't have anyone to call? What if you've possibly burned all your bridges, or people... It don't even have to be as dramatic as that you burned your bridges. Some people just probably can't take you in for their own financial reasons. What would you do? It's unfortunate that a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness, they get labeled as lazy, and without even getting the benefit of the doubt of what could have really taken place. I say all that to say, like I say on every episode, it's important to tap into that empathy, because at any moment, it could be you. Now, what does recovering from homelessness look like? Definitely have to have a game plan. For me, it was mainly the finances. Once I got sober, it was mainly how am I going to be able to afford a New York City apartment? So let's take it back a little bit. When I was speaking in the beginning, everything is connected. So if you don't have your mental health in order, you won't be able to maintain a job. If you can't maintain a job, then you can't maintain the bills that come with your apartment. If you can't continue to keep up with your bills, unfortunately, you're going to lose your apartment. So it's really important to start planning, but try to start planning small. We all want what we want. We want the nice things. Of course, you want to live in a place that you feel is desirable to you, but we have to be realistic. If you're starting off homeless and you're just getting your feet back together, you might want to think about renting a room. There's nothing wrong with starting from the beginning if that's what you can afford. But before we even start renting a room or an apartment, have we gotten in check our mental health? Have we gotten in check our sobriety? Have we gotten in check the things that can be the downfall, which would make us lose everything again? And by planning and starting small, that doesn't mean you have to stay there. That's just where we're starting out. And it's just like I tell my clients, I wouldn't put you anywhere I wouldn't live, which means you have to be open. You have to be open to accepting the first safe and affordable housing option. And again, it doesn't mean you have to stay there, but you got to start somewhere. If you are staying with somebody, let me just give you a little bit of a hint. Don't make your stay with a person a burden. If you're staying with someone, if you're not in school, you should have a job, and help out how you can. Put something on the light bill. Say, hey, I got the groceries this month. Make sure that you keep a clean space. Don't ever be in a person's... Whenever I was staying with somebody, I didn't even want you to know I was there. Danny's still staying here? Because I'm keeping my space clean and tidy. I'm until I figure out my next move. Because I don't want you to have the opportunity to tell me to get out. But again, if your name isn't on a lease, technically you're homeless. If someone has the opportunity to tell you to get the fuck out, you're homeless, boo. I hate to be the one to tell you. If you living with a female, if you living with a man, and your name ain't on a lease, you got to figure out your next move, because you don't want your life to be literally in someone else's hands. So starting from the beginning, starting small, and then building on top of those goals. And I think that that's the best way to keep your mind safe and sane, because you don't feel like you have to play catch up or you have to be in competition with the next person. Meet yourself where you're at. Build there. Be okay where you're at. And again, if that means renting a room for right now until you can afford your studio, and if that means renting a studio until you can afford your first 1 bedroom, and if that means your first 1 bedroom is in the hood, in a place that everybody turns their nose up at, go for it. It's yours. At least nobody can tell you to get out. I love going home and I don't got a curfew. I love going home and nobody's in my business. That's my shit. I come and go as I please, and I do as I please in my apartment, in my place of dwelling. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that. But I just want to let it be known, everybody's in recovery from something, and homelessness is a very traumatic experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And if you're going through it right now, and you don't know what steps to take in your specific area, reach out to 988. I mean, I say that on every episode. 988 will point you in the right direction. If you're in the New York area, you know all about 311. And they can just start you, especially in the New York area with the 311. They'll get you in the right direction. You might have to put your pride aside as we figure this thing out, because like we said, this is just the beginning, and you don't have to stay there. You don't have to stay in shelter. You don't have to stay in a neighborhood that you don't want to be in, but you have to start somewhere. And with that, my people, I will wrap it up. And until next time, you know who loves you, and I'm wishing nothing but the best. Raw Recovery, the community. Peace.